Dr. Shapiro, or can I call you Shauna?
Please call me Shauna, yes.
Yeah, you wrote this amazing book, Good Morning, I Love You. And if it's okay with you, I want to start with the title, because it's a book about mindfulness for the listeners. I'm sorry. It's a book about mindfulness that I recommend to almost everyone that's interested in mindfulness, because I love how you interweave this personal anecdotes and science, which is really some practical tips that you give. So thank you for writing this book. But what does the title mean?
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate all your kind words. And it's interesting because you mentioned science, and I'm a scientist. I'm a professor. I've been studying mindfulness for the past 20 years. And when I told my publishers the title, Good Morning, I Love You, they said, oh no, we can't do that. That doesn't sound like science. And the reason I chose to name it that is because this practice of Good Morning, I Love You is one of the most powerful practices I know. And it has transformed my life and the lives of thousands of other people. And it was taught to me by one of my meditation teachers. And it was during a really challenging time in my life. I was going through a divorce and we had a young child. And I was just feeling this tremendous sense of shame and judgment, and I'm not okay, I'm not good enough, I've made some huge mistakes. And instead of shaming and judging myself, my teacher suggested I start practicing kindness, so that when I wake up in the morning, she said, try saying, I love you, Shauna. And I thought, no way. It sounded so hokey. And, again, I'm a scientist. She saw my hesitation and she said, how about just saying, good morning, Shauna? Instead of, shaming and judging yourself when you wake up, just try greeting yourself with kindness. So I woke up the next morning, I took a breath, I put my hand on my heart. She told me it releases oxytocin, the love hormone, it's good for you. She knew the science would win me over. So I woke up, put my hand on my heart, took a breath and said, good morning, Shauna. And it was kind of nice, right? Instead of the avalanche of judgment and fear, I just greeted myself with kindness. And I kept practicing. And as I practiced, I started noticing subtle shifts, a flash of kindness, less judgment, less fear, less anxiety. And a few months later, it was my birthday, and it was the first time I'd been alone without my husband and my son. And I woke up and I said, good morning. And then I had this image of my grandmother. And all of a sudden, this kind of love poured through me. And I said, good morning. I love you, Shauna. Happy birthday. And it was as if the dam around my heart burst. And there was this kind of outpouring of love. And, I wish I could tell you that every day since then has been this miracle of self-love and I've never felt judgment again. And that's not true. But what is true is this neural pathway, this pathway of kindness was established, and it continues to grow. And that's what I've really learned. And what the science shows is that when we judge ourselves and we shame ourselves, it literally shuts down the learning centers of the brain. It keeps us stuck in our patterns of fear and anxiety. It doesn't help us change. And it's really through kindness and self-love that we release dopamine, we turn on the learning centers, and we give ourselves the strength and the resources we need to change. So long answer, but that's why we named it Good Morning, I Love You.
And actually, what you ended with, that it inhibits the learning center, that was one of the questions that I had, and that I find a really powerful insight of the book as well. I think you mentioned it inhibits learning, but also creativity.
Yes.
And is that why we just keep on making the same mistakes over and over? Because we're completely stressed out when it happens, and we're not. It's very difficult to learn from it. Then, how does that work?
Exactly. People often ask me. They say, "Well, why don't people change? If change is possible, why don't we change?" Yeah. And it's because we keep doing the same things. We're missing this essential ingredient of self-compassion. When we make a mistake or there's something in our life that's challenging, usually we beat ourselves up. What's wrong with you? Why did you do this? Why are you feeling this way? And as I just said, that shuts down our learning centers. So what it does, it inhibits our ability to think systemically, to think creatively, to think outside the box. And we get stuck doing the same old thing. If you want to go somewhere new, you have to take a different path. And so I call these we have these super highways of habit, right? And these are our neural pathways that we've been practicing our whole lives. And we need to carve out these little country roads, right? These new paths of compassion, of patience, of creativity. And what we know from neuroscience is whatever you practice grows stronger. So what that means is what you practice moment by moment is going to grow pathways in your brain. And so we have to be very careful about, what do you want to practice, right? What do you want to grow?
And it's silly, basically, because it's such an easy advice. Everyone, I know. What I practice grows stronger. And then you just go about your day, and then stuff happens. And it's so, do you have any suggestions of how to raise the consciousness on where you're judging yourself or blocking yourself, or just because I always notice too late, looking back, I think I might have been a little bit too harsh,
Yes. So a couple things. One thing you said is we kind of go on automatic pilot, right? We keep doing the same thing. So how do we raise our consciousness? How do we wake up? And so what I teach is mindfulness. That's kind of the main practice that I teach. And part of mindfulness is your intention. And this is really knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And your intention, it wakes you up from automatic pilot, and it helps remind you, what's the most important thing, right? What do I care about? What direction do I want to set the compass of my heart? And so with mindfulness practice, every single day you ask yourself, what is my intention? Right? And it could be to be more kind. It could be to be more patient. It could be to cultivate more joy and happiness in your life. But your intention, it sets the stage for what is possible. It reminds you over and over of what really matters. So that's the first part, setting an intention. The second part, which you asked, is, well, what do I do when I notice too late? I've already judged myself. I've already made the mistake. The first step is not to judge yourself for judging, right? Because you can get in this downward spiral where you're like, oh my God, I'm so judgmental and I'm so bad at being nice. And then you're judging more. So the key is to really notice it, right? Notice the judgment, see it clearly, remind yourself, it shuts down your learning centers. And then right in that moment, practice kindness, right? It's never too late. It's never too late to begin again.
And what do you do? Is it the good morning, I love you practice, but not then in the morning, or do you have a mantra or a little? What do you do to remind yourself?
Right. So there's 2 steps. They're quite simple, and they're both based in science. So the first step is when you notice a difficult emotion. Let's say you're afraid. Okay, is just to label it, just to say fear. And there was a study done at UCLA, and what they found is when you label your emotions, it calms down your physiology. You actually bring your prefrontal cortex back online so that you have more wisdom and more logic and higher order reasoning available to you. So the first step, just by naming it, I know it sounds simple, it actually changes your physiology. The second step is to bring kindness. Right? So as soon as you notice fear, I'm afraid, I'm scared, you name it, I'm scared, there's fear here. And then you bring kindness. Sweetheart, this is hard. You're afraid. Just like you would treat a dear friend, right? What would you say to someone you love who says, I'm really afraid? Would you say, shut up, right? Or stop it? No, you'd say, oh, sweetheart, this is scary. Here, let me help. And we start to carve out these pathways of being on our own team, being our own inner ally instead of our inner enemy.
What sometimes is it's an interesting struggle. You practice this for yourself, and then you kind of notice that maybe in your relationships, in your family, or in your colleagues, and then you notice other people, well, stop judging me or stop being so harsh, and then you want to judge them for judging you, which is also, of course, judgment.
Exactly. So again, the key is awareness or mindfulness. So the word mindfulness means to see clearly. And what we want to do is we want to see clearly all this that's happening. People judge me when I want to judge them, so that we can respond effectively or wisely. So when someone's judging me, the first step is label how that makes you feel. Ouch, right? That hurts. I feel angry. I feel frustrated. I feel sad. So instead of judging them back, you stay with yourself. You name your emotion. And then the second thing is kindness. Sweetheart, ouch, it hurts to be judged by that person. So you take them out of the equation. You don't need to worry about judging them. They're living their life. Now, it doesn't mean that you let them continue to treat you badly. Mindfulness is not about having no boundaries. It actually helps you have stronger boundaries, because when you care about yourself, you take care of yourself. You say, no, that's not okay.
I like that a lot. What I wanted to share with you, because I prepped for this interview and I prepared the questions, and then a day and a half ago, the Netherlands, where I'm podcasting from, we have this total lockdown now for the first time, because our first lockdown was kind of an intelligent lockdown and we had liberties and we could go outside, and now they made it into a hard lockdown. And I noticed all around me and also in myself, and I've done a lot of work, this feeling of going inside, this, because we're more isolated, and I like being alone and in silence, but now it's like too much. And I hear a lot of people in my environment, they're slowly slipping into depression or something that I'm familiar with. And so I wanted to ask you if this is like a big error for mindfulness, because we're more isolated. We don't have to go to the mountains just in a cave to isolate ourselves. Now we can do it. Everyone is like forced to do this now at home. Right. And I hear a lot of people, and myself included, to kind of like drift off into this not so nice place in our head. So,
right.
Yeah.
So first of all, I get it. It's a hard time right now. I think all of us are feeling the stress and the pain of this time, right? In our nervous system, in our minds, in our relationships. So the first thing is it's natural, right? I think a lot of times we feel like I should be handling this better. I shouldn't be getting depressed, or what's wrong with me? So take out the judgment, take out that layer. And then you're absolutely right. This is an opportunity for this kind of very novel experience of being with ourselves. And what we have to be careful about is, how do we talk to ourselves? How do we treat ourselves in this time? And one of the practices that has really helped me, because we have been in quarantine for a long time and not able to see, I haven't seen my parents in 9 months, which has been really challenging. And so I do a practice called loving kindness. And what loving kindness does is you imagine the person that you're missing or that you can't see, and you see a beautiful image of them, and you just start to send them your love. So to my mother, may she be peaceful, may she be happy, may she be healthy. And then you think of someone else that you're missing and someone that you love, and you send them your loving kindness. And you can also receive it. You can also imagine them sending it to you. And these are meditation practices. These were not developed for COVID times. These have been developed for thousands of years to help us cultivate a wise and loving heart. So they're wonderful practices to do right now. And in fact, they were originally developed to combat fear. That the Buddha originally taught these practices to the monks when they were going into the forest to spend the night, and they were afraid of the wild animals. And so I'm really drawing on these teachings right now. And they are universal practices. Mindfulness is often associated with Buddhism, but it's found in Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism, that this is really a universal human capacity to pay attention with kindness.
Yeah, and what I got from your book, and what really helped me, is that the setting of the intention, that you can, I don't know why I had the assumption that just going into stillness is enough. That can be overwhelming. I met a shaman once, and he told me you can invite love and light, and it was so liberating. Really, I can do that. I just thought I had to sit there and just try hard, and be still and be calm. He said, no, you can invite love and light, and that's what I do when I go outside. And then I remember, like, okay, send love and light, and it's so simple, but it's so helpful. And I was so glad to find then, there's actually just research backing this up.
Absolutely. And you're making such a good point, because for me, similar to you, I kind of thought mindfulness was about just kind of sitting in silence and paying attention, really focusing my attention. And it started getting really like contracted and rigid and dark in there. Like it was kind of a scary place to go. And the kindness, this attitude of kindness has shifted everything. So that now when I practice, it's like climbing into a warm bath, right? I'm enveloping myself with this kindness and this love. And it doesn't mean that you're pretending to be happy. It doesn't mean that you never feel lonely or afraid or sad. What it means is you meet your sadness, you meet your loneliness with this love, that there's a way in which you're on your own team, and that was revolutionary for me. Yeah. And that's why I've really spent these last years studying the science behind it. Like, what happens when you're nice to yourself? Oh, it's actually really good for you.
Yeah. And then allowing yourself, like, no, this is something I need to practice. And I thought, like, okay, just sit there and then magically this enlightenment, and not enlightenment, but this feeling of bliss and happiness. Oh, I will just get there just naturally. And then really like, no, actually I can just guide myself by just saying these words. And like,
you're making such a good point. It reminds me of my first time at a monastery. It was about 20 years ago. And I was in Thailand. I was at this monastery, and I really didn't understand what mindfulness was. And I thought it was just about paying attention. And I was just forcing my mind to focus, but it kept wandering off, like all our minds do. In fact, research from Harvard shows our minds wander 47% of the time. So about half of your life, your mind is going to be wandering. But I didn't know that. And so I started getting frustrated with myself. Like, what's wrong with you? You're terrible at this. I started judging myself. And luckily, I had an interview with a monk who, at the monastery. And as I told him about my struggles, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, dear, you're not practicing mindfulness. You're practicing impatience, frustration, judgment." And then he said these 5 words that I'll never forget. What you practice grows stronger. And we know this from neuroscience. But he explained that mindfulness isn't just about paying attention. It's about how you pay attention with kindness. And this is like the secret sauce, right? This is how transformation happens. There has to be love and kindness with the attention.
And so in your book, you mentioned the 3 pillars of mindfulness: intention, attention, both we just discussed, and the third one is attitude. Or is attitude the what is the difference then between the intention and the attitude?
Right. So your intention is kind of your aspiration. It's knowing, why am I practicing? And it could be to cultivate more peace in your life. It could be to have more joy. It could be to be more present as a mother, or to sleep better, right? A lot of the clients I work with, they come because they have anxiety and they want it to go away, or they have insomnia, they can't sleep. So your intention is kind of your goal. And what I notice is it starts kind of small and personal, like I want less anxiety, and it grows bigger, like I want to be of greater service in the world. I want to feel more connected. So your intention is kind of the bigger compass. Your attitude is kindness and curiosity. Whatever arises, you're infusing your attention with kindness and curiosity. So your intention is your compass, says this is the direction I want to go. Then you gather your attention in the present moment so you can see clearly, and you pay attention with kindness and curiosity. So there's no judgment.
Thanks for clarifying. I'm a scientist myself, and I'm looking forward to starting my PhD again. I did one a couple of years ago. I stopped because the topic really did not match that good to me. Any advice that you would give to one of your PhD students or one of your students or colleagues entering in a field where there's consciousness involved? Because my topic, I want to look at the combined effects of microdosing, of the psychedelic research, and forest bathing. So a mindfulness practice in nature, and looking how both of them combined and what's the added value of microdosing on mental well-being or spiritual growth. So it's a fuzzy field. I'm a psychological scientist, so it's the hardcore data science, quantitative science.
Right.
So what would you...
So a couple of things. One is when I was first starting to study mindfulness, this was over 20 years ago, it was not scientifically proven yet. It was very fuzzy. And I got really good advice to be the best scientist I could be, to use the most rigorous methodology, to have data that was irrefutable. So when you are researching kind of out there topics, it's really important to be impeccable in your science. The second advice that I was given that was wonderful, because so many people said you shouldn't be studying this, that you're going to ruin your academic career. But one of my PhD advisors said, always study what you love. That if it's coming from love, if it's coming from this pure motivation, it will carry you through all the hardships of doing this work. And so those were kind of the two best pieces of advice that I received, and hopefully they'll help you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And you also mentioned judgment. One of the things that I'm doing now is I've been asked to write a book by a Dutch publisher about balancing leadership and ambition with letting go and surrendering. Small topic. Makes me really nervous. And they asked me this summer, and then I'm on this like downhill slide of perfectionism and this inner critic, and every podcast, everything I write, everything just feels not good enough. And I know it's a judgment, and that's why I asked you in the beginning, like, okay, how I see this. How do you balance that in your life as well? Because you're ambitious.
So I really appreciate your honesty, and I relate. And here's what I'll say. The first thing is you can't help those feelings. The feeling of I want to do this right, or I want it to be perfect, or I'm worried I'm not good enough. That just happens. It's really the second step, which is noticing those feelings and not believing them and not feeding them. So you notice them. Oh, I'm afraid I'm not going to do it right. And then you bring kindness to yourself. And for me, when I was writing this book, I've written 2 other books, and they were a push, right? There was this kind of ambition and really trying, and they were effortful. And when I signed the contract to write this book, I remember calling my mom and I said, I am only going to write this book out of joy and gratitude and devotion. That I love these practices. They have transformed my life. They really saved me at my darkest time when I had spinal fusion surgery as a teenager. And I believe in them. That as a scientist, I've seen their power. And so I said, I'm going to write this book from love, or I'm not going to write. And for the first few months, I didn't write anything because there was this pressure on me and it didn't feel joyful. And then one day it opened up, and it did. And I really wrote out of love and out of service. And it was a completely different experience than my other books.
So what, could you put your finger on it? What made it so different then?
I think it was really my intention, that I made this pure intention that I was only going to write from a place of love and gratitude instead of a place of perfectionism. So I wasn't trying to do it right. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was really letting the knowledge and the wisdom that I've been taught over so many years just pour out of me.
Yeah, just letting it happen. Guess that's why this topic came to me because it's so difficult.
We study what we need to learn. I mean, I really believe that in writing this book, I deepened my own self-love, that there was a way in which, going back to my teenage years when I was in the hospital for so long and I couldn't walk, and feeling compassion for that young part of myself and kind of cheering her on as she recovered and went to Thailand and studied in the monasteries. There's a way that writing this book healed those parts of myself. And, you know, I actually met the love of my life, who I'm marrying, a couple years ago, right when I finished writing the first draft of my book. And I believe that it was only through finding my own self-love, truly finding it, that I was able to receive someone else's love. And so I do think that we study, and we study what we're supposed to, you know, learn. And there's a way in which you're writing this book now to learn that ability to surrender.
Yeah. Is that a topic that you can relate to, or a struggle that you had? Because a scientific career, wanting to write, it's an ambition, it's a drive, it's taking leadership. And then, of course, there's the spiritual teaching, no, let go, surrender, trust the process, go from out flow. Was that a struggle for you, or a struggle that you recognize?
Absolutely. I would call it a dance. I would say that there's this dance between kind of striving and leadership and surrendering and letting go. And I think for me, my nature is a little bit more striving. And yet there's this feminine side that really enjoys surrendering. And yet that takes a lot of trust. And so I think it was through deepening my faith in myself and in this universe that I was able to better surrender and let go. And the more I was able to be kind to myself, the more I also was able to surrender. And I want to be clear, though, that a lot of times people mistake surrendering or letting go with kind of quitting or collapsing or passive resignation. And what I found is that this kindness, this self-love, it actually motivates you. It actually gives you the courage to kind of take risks and to engage. And what the research shows is that people who are more compassionate, they are better at doing exercise, eating healthy, taking care of themselves. You know, people are often afraid if they're kind to themselves, they'll just like become a fat blob on the couch.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh no, you don't have goals, no ambitions. You just sit there like, you know, yeah.
No, but you actually care about your goals, and you're not doing it for someone else, and you're not putting the pressure on yourself. You're on your cheerleading. You're like, yes, you've got this. Great job. And there'd be times when I was writing and I would say, that was great. Like, great job. And it was such a different experience than what I was used to, which is, oh my God, that's not good enough. You're not smart enough. Why are you doing this? You just let those voices go. Thank you for your opinion, but I'm not going to believe you.
Looking back, how do you see a shift in yourself and in your practice? How did your environment, your family, friends, because you had to take them with you also in your growth. Any particular advice that comes to mind looking at someone who has trouble, like, okay, well, what about my environment? Because I seem to be growing, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think
changing.
It can be challenging when you're shifting. I think especially people who have known you in those old patterns, that sometimes they can pull them out of you. And I think it's really about kind of recognizing that it can be challenging and that you're going to want to fall back into old pathways and just recommitting, right, with this deep intention of self-love. And I know for me, it's been incredibly healing, especially with my parents.
Yeah, that was what I yeah. Sorry.
Right, to have them see me as my adult self, who really has shifted from my teenage self. And it's the hardest one because they see you, so they remember. They're like, I remember who you were. And it's really liberating to recognize you're a different person. right? And you always have these tendencies. I mean, when I say I've changed, I still am who I am, and I'll always be impatient, right? I'll always have kind of a fast reactivity in me. But now I'm able to see it more clearly, and I'm able to treat it with greater kindness instead of shaming myself.
Thank you. I'm an avid book reader. What was the last book that you bought for somebody else? That you're like, oh, everyone should really read this book because it's so important.
That's a wonderful question. I am an avid book reader, and to choose just one book, you should see all my bookshelves are filled with hundreds of books. I have books. I have a very large closet with all these different shoe racks, and they're stuffed with books. I don't even have shoes in them. I have maybe 2 or 3 pairs of shoes, but I have so many books. So what would I say? One book that I always go back to that really touched me was Loving Kindness by Sharon Salzberg. And it's just such a simple way of understanding the loving kindness practice. Because for me, I was very much into mindfulness, and I felt loving kindness was too soft and too sweet and wasn't my thing. And when I got pregnant, my teacher, Jack Kornfield, said, I really think you need to switch and start doing loving kindness practice. And I trusted him, so I did. But it never felt quite comfortable, and it wasn't quite until I read that book and something opened up in me where it just made sense. So I highly recommend that book. I also love anything by Jack Kornfield or Pema Chodron or Thich Nhat Hanh, all wonderful, wonderful teachers.
Okay, I will make sure to put this in the show notes as well for people listening so that they can find these books. I have to be honest, I haven't read anything of Jack Kornfield yet, but it's Chicken Soup for the Soul, right? That's his series?
No,
oh, am I mixing?
That's Jack Canfield. So Jack Kornfield wrote A Path with Heart, which is a wonderful book, one of the kind of Bibles of mindfulness.
Oh, can you repeat the title again? Sorry, I was...
A Path with Heart.
A Path with Heart. Okay. So then I completely... Sorry.
We can edit this part out. I'll do a little tap. But we should probably wrap up in the next 10 minutes so that I have a little break before my next...
Yeah, I know. That's why I was looking at the time and then my mind kind of froze. Like, okay.
No problem. That's why we have editors. We love them.
So is there anything you, looking at COVID, the situation we're in and the challenges that you can relate to, anything that you want to advise people listening who are having a hard time?
Absolutely. Because I think for all of us, this has been a challenging time. And there's a couple things. The first thing is everything passes. Mm-hmm. So I think we kind of get overwhelmed in our fear or our loneliness, but to recognize it's impermanent, that everything changes. And what this means is that it's never too late, right? So whatever has happened in your past, whatever mistakes you've made, whatever your current situation is, it's never too late to begin again and to carve out these pathways of greater joy, greater health, greater kindness. And for me, that's one of the most hopeful messages of neuroscience, is that change is possible for all of us, no matter what.
Yeah, and I'm a not cynical, but I'm a scientist. And as I said in the beginning again, why I love and why I think your book is so important, especially for people like me who like to analyze and think about stuff. There's heaps of science backing this up, showing the health benefits, the mental benefits, the creative focus benefits. So again, I just encourage people to pick up a copy and find it out for themselves. So Shauna, really thank you for your time. And maybe we'll meet again. I
hope so. Thank you so much. I hope this was a benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.